So just did the DPF DEF delete a couple days ago, and the two bolts just snapped right off, the two that usually snap off on most people. So I'm going to show you guys a video on how to get that out, and at the same time also show you a video on how to do the EGR delete. So we're going to be getting that out. First thing we're going to do is undo both batteries on each side, disconnect those and take that out. The first thing we're going to take off is our air intake, because it just takes up a lot of space since we got the batteries off. And the batteries ended up being an assortment of 8mm and 10mm. It was a 10mm for the two posts over here to remove the part over the top of your battery, and then 8mm for the negative and positive. But on this, there's a bolt, if I'm not mistaken, is way down there, and then there was supposed to be one on ours, but it's not. That's up on top of here. You can kind of see where it's missing there. We're going to undo that, and we're going to undo the clamps. This one here, our sensor for the mass airflow sensor, and I think these you just pull back that, and then once you get it pulled back you can get it to disconnect, which I'll try to do with two hands to keep from hurting anything. And then make sure to get radiator hoses disconnected from here. And then there's one more clamp besides this one that maybe you can see is back here. And then we'll take off this whole mass airflow sensor, and of course the clamps that are here keep it down for your air filter. So once you get to this point, get a little bit better view, that's where that 8mm will be. It's also 8mm for the clamp to go around that. And I'm pretty sure what we're going to end up doing is pushing the rubber gasket here to the inside to be able to pull this thing out. So just kind of taking it, which I'll try to do with one hand, and you can see how I'm just kind of pushing it to the outside of this plastic housing. So our truck had been involved in a front end collisions. That might have been the reason it was so hard to get this thing off. But you can see it sits down into that and this one right here. And you might not have to take this off, but for me to be able to get it out on ours, I had to. And what I ended up doing, this is the gasket, I ended up having to pull it out from the inside. So I ended up pulling it to balance on something. Ended up pulling it into the air box to get it out. But then it just popped out. The next thing I'm going to do is going to be on our main cables going to the computer. I'm going to disconnect those. These should just pull back, and then they pull off. There's a little push tab on that one. I'm going to try to keep the connections as clean as possible. Once you pull those off, these will wiggle their way out, which I'll use two hands in a minute to play it safe. And then that'll keep us from having to drain the air compressor to get this big thing out of here. Now that we got those disconnected and covered, the next thing we're going to undo is going to be this guy right here. And so there's going to be two bolts here, and then there's the two bolts that are broke off down there, which yours hopefully will not break off. And then while I'm doing that, I'm also going to take this one loose, which is there, and then you can see underneath this there's one of the bolts, and the other one is over here. We're going to take those loose, and if I'm not mistaken, those are all 8mm as well. So though we've probably already got a quart of this PB Buster down there, I'm going to put a rag and spray the crap out of those two. And we're going to try to get them out with a left-handed drill bit. We'll see. We'll get to that in a little while. So all the rest of these bolts just came out so easy. I literally broke it loose and then got them out with my finger. So not really sure why those other ones snapped off like they did. Maybe it's just increased temperature. So there's going to be your pyrometer cable coming off this one, and I've just disconnected it, left the other part in the truck because that's where I'm going to hook up for my pyrometer reading for our delete tuner. There's a bracket, it's another 8mm bolt to be able to get that off. Definitely had quite a bit of soot inside of it, so probably good that we are deleting this. But yeah, the bolts just came right out. It's crazy how easy those all came out. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off, I think it's going to be easier to take the headlights off. I don't want to, but I'm probably going to take them and the bezel off the front, because then I'll have a lot more room to get to where we have to reroute radiator hose down to the bottom. And we're also going to drain the radiator, so we'll show you how to do that. So to take this front bezel off, there's some random screws. That wasn't one, but there's one here, 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 and actually these are just for the lights, which we're about to take off. And then it unclips. You just push down with a screwdriver there, and there, and there, and there, and over here. And then that whole thing just lifts up and just take it over there. So next thing we're going to do is take off our lights, and it's going to have one up here. Haven't really looked at it, but looks like there's going to be the two that are here. And then I'm also going to take off this part with the huge bolt that held on the bezel, because that's going to give us access back here to the water line that we need. Get this part that holds the bezel. You've got two here, and then there's one that's down here that you can get from the other side. And then when you go across, it's clamped on to this radiator hose, so you got to get it off. You can see where it kind of fits in there. And then over on this side, it's going to be zip tied, which I'm about to cut that. And then same thing here, there, the bottom, and then you can see there's a piece of plastic that kind of snaps on the side of it. You have to push back for it to release. But now that we've got that out and this headlight out, it's easy access to get to the radiator hose that we need to get to. But before you just rip your headlight out, make sure that you do get the three connections. There's this one, and then our orange friend there, and then the black one that's on the edge. And then you can just pull the whole headlight out. But the headlight had two connections that were up on the top, or actually there's just one on the top, and then I think two that were here, and then there's one on the bottom, but you can see where the hole was for it. And so real easy to drain once you've got the headlights out. You got the stopcock there, it'll go 90 degrees, it'll kind of stop, and it'll go one more 90 degrees. So you notice we got the Ford orange that's recommended over on this side, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of comments for this. This side has got green antifreeze, and the reason that it does is because last Monday, so it's only been there for 7 days, I had to come over here in the middle of the night because Alabama usually doesn't get extreme temperatures, but it got down to 10 degrees, and since we bought this truck used a few days before that, they didn't have it to where it would actually be protected any more than 20 degrees. So when I noticed that the sample of antifreeze I got was freezing, I drained it, and nobody had, of course, the stock Ford stuff. So now I've got stock Ford orange that we're going to be putting in it. And you can see it's easy to get the stopcock for this one too, for the lights off. Same thing, turn 90 degrees and then turn another 90 and it'll drain out. But antifreeze really doesn't look bad. No, you're not supposed to mix it. I'm definitely going to flush it all out and put new stuff in. So we'll be good to go. While this is draining, I'm going to show you guys the next step we're going to take. We're going to be getting rid of this hose right here, and then taking this hose and and just going to use a little barb to put it together, which came with our kit here. So it'll be this little guy right here, and that way it'll bypass it. That I've got came with 2 block-off plates, one that goes right under the EGR, and then this one's going to be one of the exhaust that actually goes into the EGR, or goes out into the EGR. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one on. I can't put this one on yet because I haven't drilled out and extracted those bolts yet, but I'm going to put this on just to keep from getting any mess in it. And they send some new stainless steel bolts, which is pretty cool because they'll be a little bit better for heat. So now we're going to disconnect this upper hose that's up here that goes to our EGR, and then we'll follow this down. We're going to disconnect it, which, I'll get my light, maybe you can see it a little better. And you can feel it, kind of move it around, and you can see that it's the one jumping way up and down that goes all the way to here, which makes it much easier to have those headlights removed. So we're going to disconnect here, and disconnect up there, and then I'm going to run this hose that came with the kit, which I've kind of got straightening out a little bit. I'm going to run it basically as a bypass from up here to down here, and it comes with the clamps and everything to be able to do it. And I've been penetrating these with penetrating oil, the 7 bolts that you have to take off, which there's one up here. You can kind of see they're all over the place. They're up underneath there, way back in the back. After I get it out, I'll kind of show you where all the bolts are. That way you'll know. But make sure everything else is disconnected as well. And we're going to get that thing out of here. I honestly thought the bolt all the way in the back under there was going to be the hardest one. And I put a wobble with a universal. And I don't know how it even turns in this position, but it just came right out. So maybe that's making up for those two breaking off. But maybe that'll help you guys. An extension with an extension and the 8mm socket. That last bolt was probably the biggest pain all the way back in there, but that exact same setup of the wobble with the universal did eventually work. So now I've disconnected all of our sensors that were up on the top of this, and I'm about to take a dead blow hammer and just kind of tap around to break the seal on it and see if I can pull it out. I have to admit, it's 30 something degrees out here and I've got sweat pouring on me trying to get this thing out of here. So all the way in the back, I guess I'm gonna have to take whatever that sensor is out, and it feels like there's something attached all the way back there. I don't know if I'll be able to get a camera shot or not, but I can't even get my hand hardly back there to feel what it is. So I'm gonna take that sensor off and see what we can do, but it's definitely not coming out there very easy. So way back in the back, you can see that bolt barely, and there's a little retention piece to keep the cabling on it. I just pushed that off with a screwdriver, and I'm going to try to use a wrench that I'll show you guys. It's a 10mm socket from what I've read online, so I'm going to use it and see if it works. If it does, I'll show you guys how to loosen the little nut. There's a retainer piece that's holding on the exhaust back pressure sensor that you have to take off of that to be able to get this thing out. So we've even used an inspection light trying to figure out. You can see the exhaust back pressure sensor kind of up the top of the screen, which my camera's not really focused on that too much, and then the heat shrink around that other cable. But we've been working on this for probably almost 3 hours, which you're probably gonna laugh about it, but we've gotten the 10mm bolt. We're having to back it 1/4 turn at a time, and it might have been from that wreck that this truck was involved with. And I'll show you guys a little bit what tool we're using too, but pretty crazy. So that literally took 5 hours to get that thing out, and I'm going to show you guys why. Instructions that I read with kits and even a video that I saw said that it was just a hook in the back. On a 2011, I guess the first year they made it, is not a hook at all. I ended up cutting it out because we just wasted so much time, and these threads were so just butched up from the factory, I guess, because I looked, this thing has never had one replaced. The only thing we're able to do was to get this ratcheting guy back here, and you guys will find out when you do this, there's hardly any room. We had to put it here, hold it, get a crowbar on the edge, and crowbar up against the firewall. Is about the only thing we could do, and it would barely move. And now that we got this thing out, I'm kind of curious how hard it's going to be to get that to move. I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't understand. I'm like having to push really hard to get this thing to move, and it shouldn't be like that. So yeah, that's the reason that took so long. So lifted it up, got this as far back as we could with this strap to pick up from the back, and now we've got it out, got the plate on that. And in a minute, I'm going to get to tackle trying to get those threads untapped. So I'm going to try. We've been doing JB Weld on them for the past 6 days. Or not JB Weld, sorry. PB Blaster for the last 6 days. And I'm going to end up trying to use left-handed drill bits and see if we have any luck getting them out. But you can see not much room, and I had to be really careful cutting that with a Sawzall. Extremely careful. But got it all hooked back up. Life is good. Long time to drill those out and retap. I ordered some helicoil sets in case this doesn't hold up, but I ended up a 1/4 inch tap with I think it was 20 threads. So I think yeah, 1/4 20, and ended up tapping that out. Got some stainless steel bolts that we're going to see if I've got about the right length. I put anti-seize stuff all over it in case I ever have to take this back out. But this is one of the sensors off of the DEF that I took off, so I put it on there. It's going to be one of the gas temperatures, exhaust gas temps, and I'm just going to put that thing in there, and I'll find out what to torque it down to, but I think it was 10 pounds per foot torque. I'm definitely not going to over torque it. So now that we've got the plate on over there, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to put a vacuum on our radiator system. So you just find the adapter that goes in, which this is it, just hard to do with one hand. And once you get it in, I use an airlift system. We'll pop it in there, we'll hook it up to an air compressor, and we're going to hold a vacuum on it just to make sure that we get this thing completely full and don't have any air pockets. So we ran our compressor for about a minute. We were trying to reach somewhere about 25, which is right where we're at. We're trying to make sure that we don't have any leaks, so we're going to leave it there for a second. And then we're going to switch out hoses, and we're going to start adding coolant. So the other hose is over here. It's got a little filter on it, and you end up just putting it in the antifreeze, and we've got the official Ford antifreeze that we're going to put back in there. So I'm going to suck 2 entire concentrated gallons into this, and then I'm going to put 2 gallons of distilled water, and then I'm going to do the other as the actual mixed half and half, so it should all be right whenever we get it done. Got a mixture of 2 gallons of the orange and 2 gallons of the distilled water, and about to turn on and let this stuff start filling back up with our negative pressure. And then we're going to let it drain into it and be good to just make sure that as it's going into it, you'll see your hoses uncollapse from the negative pressure. We just don't want to let this run air dry because we could get air into it. So I'm going to keep an eye on that instead of videoing it to make sure I don't get air into it. 4 gallons of it in there, and we still have quite a bit of negative pressure, so I'm going to go ahead and mix up some more to let it suck it in. We're slowly drinking through. We added another gallon of concentrate, another gallon of distilled water, and hoses are still collapsed but getting a little bit more filled up. We're staying right at the cold fill line, and we still got a little bit of pressure before it's completely out. So it's working about the way it's supposed to, which is great. And you can see our pipe is about filled back up. We did the same thing for our secondary radiator, and now that that's mixed up, whatever's left I'm going to end up putting in some pre-mixed and just having the back of the truck in the toolbox just in case. But ended up putting washers. I was scared after I tapped those. I didn't want to screw them too much and break those off, and God forbid have to do that again. But about to put the batteries back on. I'm going to tape all of this good stuff up real tight, make it look better. I pulled the 90-degree off of this vacuum hose and put the, comes with a kit, this little tap over it. I'm going to put a piece of tape just to make sure it doesn't come off as well. And then we can start putting the battery, the air intake, everything else back on it, and should be about ready to fire up. So sadly, back at that little thread in there again. So I'm going to put a helicoil in this time, and the helicoils are pretty cool. And I've already got it drilled a little bit bigger and tapped out. We're going to put this in, and then you can actually screw your bolt into this. So we'll see if this makes it better. It just had a small exhaust leak, and I was scared it was going to lead to something worse if I didn't get it tightened really tight. So put this back in, let you know. 14-hour day and 1 12-hour day later. We're at the truck, it's running. It has 8 new glow plugs, which is our It has a sweet sounding exhaust, which here's the turbo in a second. It has 2 new fuel filters, a primary and a secondary. It has brand new, proper, completely flushed out antifreeze that should have new oil filter. And it has a very cleanly installed guy here. If I get this, got the cable running to there, and you can't see it at all going down. OBD2 port plugged into there, and all the wiring is up under the dash. It was ridiculous, but it's done. And the programmer is on in case I ever need to turn it off while driving. One of our upfitter switches. It's pretty crazy. I'm gonna let you hear it. So I'm gonna give her a little fuel. You can actually hear the turbo now.